Travel sometimes sounds really glamorous, but the behind-the-scenes work can be crazy. In this interview, you'll hear from Dominique Callimanopulos, who's giving back through her travel business. She'll be sharing about creating an environment that encourages risk-taking and how building a network and being a thought leader can make your job a lot easier.
Welcome to the Social Good Instigators Podcast, where your host, Kirsten Bullock, interviews leaders of social entrepreneurship ventures who share what's working. Please add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. Now, let's get on with the show.
Hello, and today I'm here with Dominique Callimanopulos, and she is the founder of Elevate Destinations, which she founded in 2005. Dominique, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kirsten.
A couple of interesting things about Dominique. She loves East Africa, is very committed to and passionate about conservation. She spent some time in anthropology, psychology, many different nonprofit ventures. And what I find most inspirational is one of the things that she has on her website, it's a wish list of places to go next, was Iceland, and she's already been there. So congratulations on writing it and then making it happen.
Thanks. It's not very hard. It's not very hard when you're in the travel business.
Oh, true. Places. And did you enjoy Iceland?
Yeah. I mean, it's a fantastic destination because it's so close, and it is, particularly if you travel to the more remote areas of Iceland, there's just fantastic hiking and beautiful, beautiful landscape and views. Wonderful food. Great people. So it's a really great destination that you can spend a lot of time in or just do a short kind of long weekend trip to.
Oh, neat. I'll have to put that on my list. So when you founded Elevate Destinations, you also started integrating in at some point this buy a trip, give a trip concept. Could you talk a little bit more about that and how it works?
Yeah, for sure. So we had Elevate Destinations was founded in 2005, and I founded it with the idea of doing travel that gave back in some way. I'm just giving you a little bit of background about the business as context for the Buy a Trip, Give a Trip initiative. So about half of our company is devoted to organizing group travel, particularly in the nonprofit sphere. So we do a ton of donor trips for A-list nonprofits that want to take board members and donors to visit projects all over the world. So really giving them a chance to see the projects they've been investing in, get a first-hand view, and it's just such a win-win for the travelers, the donor travelers, and for the nonprofits who are our clients. They get to basically outsource all of the headaches of organizing a trip, essentially for free to us, and really get to concentrate on the educational component of the travel with their donors and cultivating those relationships. And for the donors, it's really become kind of best practices for nonprofits now to expose their donors to projects on the ground and see the fruits of their investment. So about half of our company is devoted to that, and then the other half is really devoted to putting together custom private trips for families and couples, a lot of solo travelers as well, who want to travel but also get under the skin of the culture and engage in the community and conservation initiatives on the ground. So for some families, that would take the form of doing several days of volunteering as part of their vacation. Probably they can do up to a week of volunteering. For other travelers, it's more just kind of becoming educated about what conditions are in the countries they're visiting. So we were doing all this for a number of years. And, just increasingly as we developed our nonprofit partnerships on the ground, and with our clients, just so aware of what a one-way street travel is kind of worldwide, that the haves get to travel and the have-nots really don't. So the idea was minted with my team to put together the first Buy a Trip, Give a Trip program. It's kind of a one-for-one in the travel industry, kind of like the Tom's Shoes model, where for every shoe you buy, they donate a pair of shoes to youth in the countries that they manufacture their product. And I think they've gone beyond that now. But this has never been done in the travel industry. So at this point, for every trip that we book, we are able to sponsor youth to visit the sites usually reserved for tourists in the destinations we serve. So, for instance, we have youth from the townships in Cape Town going out to Table Mountain for the day, or getting to, youth in Kenya getting to actually visit a national park that they might live right next door to, but have never had the means to visit. Take kids from an orphanage in Cambodia out to Angkor Wat, which is, part of their national heritage, but which they were completely ignorant of. So for us, with mobility being a kind of currency in today's society, we feel that we're trying to level the playing field a little bit and give kids worldwide access to at least appreciate the sites that draw tourists to their country. This plays an educational role for kids. It widens their horizons. It deepens the context for the choices that they make, exposes them to new options. So it's really, about broadening their horizons, and it's just such a win-win. And what's evolved from this Buy a Trip, Give a Trip initiative that Elevate pioneered is we have now created a one-for-one travel alliance in the travel industry, so that other companies that are starting to model the same initiative and are doing the same thing can come together and, trade stories and best practices and become a real force for providing travel opportunities to youth in country, to underserved youth in country. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. But it's really exciting, and we've had a great response from the industry. And, our clients also just love the fact that, just love knowing that when they travel, they are also empowering local youth to do the same and enjoy some of the very sites and places that they're enjoying during their trip.
Great. So when did you first see the need for the project? When did you first recognize that these kids in other countries weren't being able to visit those national sites?
Well, I think it was like a slow dawning as we, as I mentioned, partnered with local nonprofits that were providing volunteer opportunities for our travelers, or were providing community engagement opportunities for our travelers. And realizing that, for many of those communities, they were pretty, they did not have the luxury of being able to, some of them had never been in a vehicle. And it just became clear that this was kind of a no-brainer, that this was something that we in the travel industry, with help of our ground partners, could organize very easily, very inexpensively, kind of day excursions for local youth. So it, was kind of a slow dawning, but as I mentioned, we really minted the concept in 2013.
Okay. And since you already had the partnerships in place, like you said, it was easy to get the trips set up. What else made it
very easy?
What else made it easy for you?
So we had, I come from a nonprofit sphere, so we really began Elevate Destinations with our donor trips, and so I have a very rich network in the nonprofit space. So, sort of understanding, having that inclination, a sort of cause orientation, a sort of disposition to serve underserved populations already in myself, it made it easy to perceive what was going on and to kind of feel an impulse to do something of this nature. And, as you mentioned, we already had, such a trusted network. After being in business for 10 years, we already had such a trusted network of ground partners who were aligned, in many cases aligned with our values. So it made it super easy to get them, to inspire them to get on board with this Buy a Trip, Give a Trip initiative, and, contribute in-kind donations as well, provide the transportation, that sort of thing. So it ended up being just such a feel-good project for our partners on the ground, for the kids we serve, for our travelers and also for our team at home who love to see pictures and stories from the kids who are getting to go on these excursions. It's just, really brightens your day as, you just get, an incredible report from a kid who may have never seen the ocean before and has finally gotten to go to the coast. It's really inspiring, and I feel we're planting all these wonderful seeds worldwide through these trips, and very happy that other companies are following suit and doing the same thing now.
Great. And I'm sure that along the way you ended up running into some challenges, some areas that didn't work quite so easily. Do any of those come to mind, and would you be willing to share?
Yeah, with the Buy a Trip, Give a Trip initiative, not so much. The only challenge we had is, initially it was just us doing it. So it was great for our brand and great from a marketing perspective. And then as other companies wanted to copy us, we realized, well, it's not really exclusive to Elevate, but obviously our priority is, making more of this happen and facilitating it. So we weren't going to hog our idea. And we're used to actually, not to, boast, but we're a small company, but we're used to being thought leaders in the space. We've pioneered a lot of sustainable initiatives and concepts in the past that have caught on in the industry. So, I think just as is so much of our past work, the challenge becomes to continue to differentiate ourselves, as a pioneering sustainable travel company, just as we are paving the way for everyone else to copy us. So I think that's definitely an ongoing challenge, but one that we're kind of used to. When I first started in the industry, there weren't a lot of travel companies that were advertising themselves as green or sustainable or wanting to give back. I would go to trade shows and people would sort of look at me critically and what are you trying to do? And, now it's really everybody in the space is, giving back in some way, and attending to in the environment. It just has to be part of every corporate profile, to really be considered, a good company. So we've seen a lot of change in the industry over the 12 years that we've been in it. And, I think this initiative is no different. We'll just see a lot more companies giving back in this particular way, and we'll just continue to think of good new ideas.
Great. And there are probably a lot of nonprofit leaders who would like to become more thought leaders. And so you said that we've been thought leaders and all that, and it sounds like it just is something that magically happened. My guess is that's something that you invested time in and you developed. Could you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I don't know how, I don't think it's been a very formal process. First of all, I'm not a nonprofit leader. We are a corporation.
Oh, absolutely.
We are in this for-profit. But, I think it's, I'm a creative, I like to think of myself as a creative thinker. Just, I'm always interested in exploring and thinking outside the box. So, as a founder, I like to think that I bring that to the work culture of my team. And, from the beginning, we've always encouraged everyone to contribute their creative ideas. And there's not a lot of red tape. So if you have a good idea, you can just try it out and run with it. I think one of your questions was about success and failure. I don't know if you can ask that next, but I think that, I'll just mention here that, I think that, success is really the tip of the iceberg that you can see, and underneath the water is the mass of the much larger mass of the iceberg that is all about trial and error and failure. I think evolving success is all about many, many, many failures, because you're not trying things and experimenting and failing, and you're not learning and growing and experimenting. So, so I think that, creating a work culture that accepts people's failures, quote unquote, or gives them permission for trial and error, and, appreciates the successes, but also learns a lot from the failures, quote unquote. I think that's really key to having a dynamic and creative work culture that celebrates new ideas.
What are some ways that you've done that with your team, given them permission to fail? A lot of times it's, I think, innate in us that we don't want to. So how do you help build that supportive environment that encourages that?
Well, I think number one, you try to keep communication very real and honest. People feel like they can just kind of speak honestly and not be too inhibited about what's on their mind, and can just try out ideas without, a lot of censorship going on. And two, then you give them permission and support when they have an idea to execute it. And three, you don't come down hard on them if the idea doesn't work out. You really want to encourage a revolution, of ideas being tried out, whether they succeed or fail, and then on to the next. So I think it's just kind of keeping things positive and moving forward. And, that trial and error is part of that. And, that just happens through communication and through, other, some team members watching how you're responding to projects from other team members, like that. I mean, that's my experience.
Because obviously when you try a lot of things, some of those things don't work. They're, quote, a failure or a learning experience, however we want to put that. Do you have an example of a time when somebody tried something that just flopped and how you turned that into a learning experience?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give an example of one team of sort of, I have plenty of examples of my own failures, I'll give a couple of examples. I'd like to talk about one team member who really took a kind of, flop experience and turned it around completely. Well, I'll start with her and then I'll talk about some of my own. So we had one team member who had, a fairly junior team member, but who was very enthusiastic and really eager to get out into the field. So we kind of threw her into the deep end and had her run a trip to Africa for, a nonprofit client that we were working with. And really, it did not go so well. Her inexperience really showed up. We had some difficulties with our ground team, who, kind of flaked out at various key points. This was, quite a few years ago. This kind of thing really never happens anymore, partly because of her experience. So, it was traumatizing for her in a certain way, but she came back and she totally turned those lemons into lemonade. She was completely systematic about analyzing exactly what had happened on the trip, where the pain points were, how to revise things, both in our systems and on the ground to prevent anything of the kind ever happening again. And I have to say, we have a masterful donor travel team now, partly because of that experience and that she just brought it all into the lab. So that was, that kind of individual learning, super important. But, I always, I think she felt like we always had her back. She could call us upset and crying, but, we were there to support her. And, I never gave her a hard time about it, the trip not going so well, because that's work and that's life. And sometimes things go, better than other times. And we really have reaped a lot of gold from that difficult experience. So that is one example, but, which kind of highlights her. But there, I have many examples of my own. I mean, to launch a company, you have to try a million different things and, throw a lot of spaghetti against the wall and see what's going to stick. I didn't have a background in travel, so I was just kind of daring and bold. I had nothing to lose. So I tried all kinds of things, and some things worked and some things didn't work so well. But, I think it's when you're starting a company or any venture, you really have to allow yourself to experiment or you're not going to be innovative. And you have to, in order to succeed, you have, at least in my business, you have to be innovative. If it's like a shark. If you stay still, you're just going to die. There's just too much this dynamic that's happening in the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a business concept too that says that if you're not growing, you're dying. You're either doing one or the other.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go. I think that's true. And it's definitely true in the travel space, which is just, an incredibly competitive space. So as everyone is now, online, and, many of the more proprietary relationships that you might have had as a tour operator, people can now book direct online with lodges and everything. So it's really a very competitive space.
Mm-hmm. So do you have any books or resources that have helped you on your journey that might be beneficial for others?
Oh, I think just everything, just read you have to be like a sponge and just take in as much as you can. You never know when an idea is going to be useful. And it can come from anywhere. It can come from, books that are quote unquote on the subject, to literature that's put out by associations you belong to private conversations, to, I even remember in my early years getting a lot of support from watching an old BBC series about someone who was a cook in Victorian times. It was kind of a wonderful series. I think it was called The Duchess of Duke Street. And she was a cook and had to manage all kinds of challenges being a professional woman in those days. So narratives of lone professional pioneering women have been particularly a particular support to me personally. So, I think it can come from anywhere. And I think it just has to do with, what nourishes you in your development and in your thinking, and empowers you to be bold and unafraid and accepting. I mean, we have to accept a lot of conditions that are not ideal, increasingly, in the world today. I mean, certainly in the travel space, we are on top of what is happening worldwide on a daily basis. And we see a lot of degradation going on. We see so much conflict. We see natural and human-made disasters. So it is very much a space where one has to be accepting of things one can't control. And so I think that's also useful practice.
Absolutely. Well, Dominique, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and your experiences. I know this will be very helpful for other folks.
Great. Thanks so much, Kristen.
You're welcome.
I guess if I was going to, sort of one last thing in terms of what I have found most supportive and inspiring is really, to stick to your values and your ethics, because if you start having a lot of mission creep because of market conditions, and you find yourself really pulled away from your core ethics and values, you can get very lost. So I think that really being as clear as you can about what your purpose is in doing the work you do is really a great compass.
That's a great piece of advice. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kirsten.
You're welcome. And thank you to all our listeners for everything you do to make the world a better place.
Thanks for listening to the Social Good Instigators podcast with Kirsten Bullock. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll check out our prior episodes, and that you'll pass along our web address, socialgoodinstigators.com, to your friends and colleagues in the social good sector.